Alright, we are recording. Yay. I'm moving some windows around on the screen, saying that thing down. It's Runaround is the name of this chapter for nope, that way. iRobot. And as I said at the end of the previous one, this is one story that does stand out in my mind. From when I had read it 15 years ago. I really liked it then, I still like it now, although I was seeing a little bit more of a verboseness to it here that is unfortunate, but is one of those. Sometimes you gotta just state it and kind of labor certain points. It's unfortunate that you can't always use natural, conversational, writing to convey points. But it's is what it is what it is. Okay, so premise to Runaround is you are following Greg Powell and Mike Donovan. These two are the deutagonists. Basically, they're the pair. I can't quite remember the term because it's protagonist. Well, no, technically they would both be protagonists. Well, no, it is deutagonist. Well, it's the protagonist role, but between two characters. So it would be, like in classic Star Trek, you'd have a tritagonist, I guess, or something like that, because it would be Kirk, Spock, and McCoy that typically are, everything's about them. Everything follows them. Others are just supporting characters. It's not always true, but yeah. Anyway, it's just these two. And even in this first sentence, is it maybe it's two sentences. For the chapter, you already can get a sense of them. It was one of Gregory Powell's favorite platitudes that nothing was to be gained from excitement. So immediately we're getting a sense of him. So when Mike Donovan came leaping down the stairs towards him, red hair matted with perspiration, Powell frowned. So right away, we get this sense of these two characters. And it's a single sentence. This is a somewhat long sentence, but it is a single sentence. That Powell is emotionally controlled. That sees it as excitement is wasted energy, essentially. Donovan does get excited. And the red hair, it is stereotype, but, it's supposedly people with red hair are a little bit more fiery anyway. Wouldn't necessarily say that is true of Donovan, but he is definitely, of the two, the more excitable. So you might think from this initial description that they wouldn't necessarily get along, because they do have such different temperaments, but no, they get along very well because they work together very well. That they balance each other out, they have their own strengths and weaknesses, and they work together perfectly. So because of that, they get sent together on certain missions. In this case, it is to Mercury, where the premise here is that basically stations of one kind or another have been set up on various planets in the solar system. Mercury, however, is the most difficult, because it is one side always facing the sun, so it gets very, very hot, and there's a lot of chemicals as well there that Mercury's gravity is just barely holding onto in some cases, or they are just that heavy of chemicals, that heavy of elements, that they stay there, and the sunshine and such isn't enough to boil them away. This is one thing that for my Catherine verse is actually reversed. More or less, at least, because I have it as Mercury. And by the way, I did not remember the story necessarily when I was writing the Catherine verse. But in any case, it still is. I see Mercury as being a higher priority target to put something on than, say, not necessarily more than Mars. It depends. It depends. Mars is a fun one to target because it seems like you could live there. But there's that part of me that for my science fiction would be, well, yeah, but if you target an asteroid that you pull into Earth orbit, or asteroids to put into other orbits around the sun, that kind of scratches the same itch as trying to colonize Mars, but would be potentially a lot easier and a lot cheaper. Even more so than the moon, potentially, because asteroids could be so much smaller, and so the gravity and such is less an issue. So it would be easier to go and back. go there and back than to the moon and back. I'm not sure if Asimov suggests, I don't remember if he suggests anything being done at the gas giants, but I would just see it as, well, Mercury, because of the constant sunlight on one side, you can manufacture things that is very, very useful. So that's why, to me, I do see it as a high priority for my fiction, not his. Hey, different authors, different priorities. Wonderful thing. But it has proven very difficult to set anything up there. It's referred to as a jinx, in fact. Which is why these two have been sent, because they're kind of the best at what they do. Along with a new robot called Speedy, to try to get the station there that had been built about a decade prior. They've been sent to basically try to get it up and running again. Unfortunately, and the reason why Donovan is now running towards Powell, is that Speedy, so they've got set up, and this is not really how I would do it, but you have to create the situation. The way the station is powered and cooled is by having solar cells, essentially. Solar arrays set up that are absorbing the energy and casting a shadow. And then the energy is also being used to actively cool the facility. Problem is, it's been a decade, and they're kind of falling apart. In order to repair them, you need selenium, which is available on Mercury. They describe that there's very nearby 3 different pools that Speedy can be sent to get it, because Speedy can exist out there. He was designed to exist on the surface of Mercury. Humans are not. They do have spacesuits that can handle it, but only for like 20 minutes safely, up to 30 minutes, so an additional 10 minutes where, yeah, you're not in good shape, but technically you're not dead yet. And so Speedy was sent out to get some selenium. The only problem is he hasn't returned, and it's been hours. So it's, okay, what's going on here? And, yeah. So they do have some radio equipment, and Donovan has already used that to figure out where Speedy is, and has marked it on a map. And even points out to Powell, that red X there is the selenium pool that I sent him to. It's the nearest one, that's why I sent him there instead of the other two. And you marked that there yourself. Yes. Look at this. The little dots that marked the position formed a rough circle around the red cross of the selenium pool, and Powell's fingers went to his brown mustache, the unfailing signal of anxiety. So it's like, this is the first time for what's been described here, that he's actually anxious, that this is actually troubling him. And in a way, it actually makes a lot of sense that this is what would do it. Not just Speedy hasn't come back, we lost him. Because potentially that's yeah, we lost him. All right, moving on. I'm just like, if he's gone, he's gone. But the fact that it's a circle, what I imagine it means here, what we should interpret here about Powell, is he recognizes this is a pattern, which means there's a reason. And that reason means later attempts may also fail, but also means we might be able to get Speedy back. That there is something causing this. We might be able to do something to bring him back in. So it's like, now we actually do have to put in the effort. Okay. Okay. So next, I do have an emergency situation like this in a letter from Catherine, but I handled it a little differently, hopefully a little bit better. We'll find out when I get to rereading it for videos on that. Thinking a little bit, because here we start getting a little bit more either the verboseness or the things are being mentioned just when they need to be mentioned. Here is more so the verboseness, in that the facility does have some other robots there, but they're a decade old, and even then I think at one point it's referred to as being 50 years old, so they are definitely older models. And they have 6 of them. They can only use 2, though. But one thing about it is they power them up, which they are atomically powered, as mentioned. And when they do, it's like, are you awake? Yes, master. And then it's like, oh, shit, that's right. These are from that era. It looked at... Okay, this is talking about the era. looked to as if the use of robots on Earth would be banned. So preparation, because there was concern that you would need to, that they would end up being banned. So to try to avoid that, the makers were fighting that, and they built good, healthy slave complexes into the damned machines. This is Powell talking, explaining to Donovan what's going on here. Why, yes, master. So it is an interesting concept there, that in order to placate those who would be bothered by the potential of these robots in one form or another being a hazard to people, which this would imply more so labor union kind of stuff. And it's kind of funny, but the idea that, oh, well, if we just make them truly mechanical slaves, that'll make people more comfortable, that no, that they will do what we want and only what we want and nothing more than what we want. It's like, yeah, I mean, true, it's a different time from when this was written. I don't remember when iRobot was written, but I think today most people would be like, yeah, no. And not even with the silliness where, like in computers, not anymore, but you used to have, you could have one hard drive connected and then a second, but one would be the master drive, one would be the slave drive. And you do see that terminology in things where it's like, you got some people today that are like, oh, we can't have that, we have to get rid of that. That's stupid. All right, I'm saying that is stupid. The words only have a poor, unfortunate, or bad meaning when you give them those meanings. But they do still have words with legitimate definitions. But I still think, even without that, even going before that silliness, not too long ago, but you go back to before that silliness, you still have people being like, yeah, I don't like the idea of building robots that are literally constructed to be slaves, and they see themselves as slaves. That's not really a good thing. It really isn't. Because then you still start seeing the whole... I mean, even if it is they are a lesser species. I mean, here, think of it this way. To a degree, a workhorse, is a servant. It is in a servile position. But you still don't want to treat it as a slave and treat yourself as a master in that way. You are dominant over it because you're a man, it's a horse. You use it, but you still take care of it, and you still have care for it. With robots, trying to change it, I think, would be unhealthy in various ways and lead to issues. So it is interesting to see it here. But it is I could see there just being a different time when Asimov wrote it. Like, if I were to write the story, I wouldn't describe it that way. But the idea of it being... I think, yeah, I'd do it more that way. Instead of it being a slave complex, just have it be more that they are utterly submissive. That they, at any request, will do what they can to satisfy it. Because there can still be some issues there, but it might be more like what we saw with Robbie in the previous chapter, in that Robbie is absolutely dedicated to Gloria, so it would be more so that kind of submission than just straight up is a slave. So yeah, but it is still interesting. It's still interesting, and could be, as I said, it could just be one of those, because it's been decades since this was written, that my interpretation, my meaning for some of this might be, if Asimov was still alive, it could be like, oh no, that's exactly what I was thinking. But it's just how we view the language has changed. Because culture changes. Okay, that's the... Can we get that a little different? There we go. Okay, Okay, I think it actually is mentioned later, but another thing. Again, this was considered a safety protocol to keep the robots from becoming an issue. They are not allowed to move without somebody riding them. So they actually have and they are huge. These things are huge. I think it's described as like, even sitting down, 7 feet tall. They have grooves on their shoulders, a hump, and their ears are elongated. The reason why is so that a human can straddle their head, sit there, and hold on to their ears to pilot them, essentially. And that they are not to move except when they have such a pilot. Again, this was just to satisfy the whole, no, they can't do anything harmful to you. Because they can't do anything without you. So it would always be a person in charge. Okay. So we get some explanation here for how the station works. And yeah, I'll get to that. Because they realized when going through some tunnels that it's actually, it's a lot of stuff is still working here. Cheap energy, cheapest in the solar system. Sun power, and on Mercury's sun side, sun power is something. That's why the station was built in the sunlight rather than in the shadow of a mountain. It's really a huge energy converter. The heat is turned into electricity, light, mechanical work, and what have you, so the energy is supplied and the station is cooled in a simultaneous process. So this is a little verbose, because you think Donovan should know some of this, but it's very valid and very good to talk about, because it is something that people wouldn't necessarily think about. I would disagree with that, though, but not... what's said there is great. I would just disagree in that, yeah, I'd put some distance where it's like, okay, not in the shadow of a mountain. Well, no, let's have the human side in the shadow of a mountain so that if something goes wrong with power, it still is livable. And you just have on the other side of the mountain is where you would have the solar panels and such. Or even have it underground with the solar up top so that it still is even with a utter power failure, it's still somewhat survivable. Or not a total power failure, but like very low power. Like if you just had generators or something like that, that'd be enough to circulate the air. You're still in a position where the temperature alone isn't what's going to kill you. At least not yet. So there is that, but it is, you do need to create tension somehow. Okay, Okay, so now we get a little bit of what's going on with Speedy, because they've ridden the robots out far enough that radio communication is being used, but on Mercury, it doesn't go very far, so they need to get close to Speedy to hear anything. And here's what he's saying. It said, "Hot dog, let's play games. You catch me and I catch you. You, love, can cut our knife in two, for I'm little buttercup, sweet little buttercup." Whoops. Turning on his heel, he sped off in the direction from which he had come, with a speed and fury that kicked up gouts of baked dust. Yeah. So he's not well. Okay. So now getting to the whole Powell starting to try to analyze this very pragmatically. I'm just trying to make sure. Do I need to? Because I know what the answer is. I remembered from all these years later. Because Donovan's seems he's drunk. Speedy's perfectly adapted to normal Mercurian environment. I don't want to say D, but anyhow. But this region, as I'm swept wide, it's definitely abnormal. There's our clue. Now, where do these crystals come from? They might have formed from a slowly cooling liquid, but where would you get a liquid so hot that it would cool in Mercury's sun? Volcanic activity, Donovan suggested instantly. So basically, Powell is now starting to be like, okay, this guy, Speedy is supposed to exist here. He's designed to exist here. The fact that something is setting him off means that there's got to be some anomaly here. We have to start considering what that is. And it's like, okay, there's weird crystals here. Crystals typically would form out of a liquid. It's like you wouldn't have a solid suddenly transition to a crystal. It's already in some sort of molecular structure. Why would it change? So it's like, okay, what could that possibly be? And something that it was a liquid and then cooled. And down was like volcanic activity. And then they start working through and figuring out, and I just want to check. Okay. They eventually conclude that it must be something that released carbon monoxide. And I'm not sure if this is true. It might be, because Asimov, I'm pretty sure he was actually a professor of biochemistry. Don't quite remember. He was a professor. He was a very, very intelligent, educated man. But in any case, what he describes is that at this temperature, the carbon monoxide that is in the area will react with iron, and being made out of steel, Speedy is largely iron. It will react with that to actually degrade him damaging his body and potentially killing him. Okay? Now, this is important because exactly at the explanation... Okay, where are we? Exactly at the explanation. The conflict between the various rules, the 3 laws of robotics, is ironed out by the different positronic potentials in the brain. This is where we're getting very verbose, but I'll finish it. We'll say that a robot is walking into danger and knows it. The automatic potential that Rule 3, that it must keep itself safe, sets up... The automatic potential that Rule 3 sets up turns him back. But suppose you ordered him to walk into that danger. In that case, Rule 2, must obey humans, sets up a counter potential higher than the previous one, and the robot follows orders at the risk of existence. So basically, that circle, it's because he's ordered to go in. But by going in, it would endanger himself. So there's a certain potential that I must follow orders, but then the danger rises. And once it matches, now it's like, oh, I have to start turning back. But then this goes down, so it's just bobbing up and down like this. That's why he's going in a circle. Although it's actually not quite a circle. They do describe that he is like, as he's going around, he'll step a little closer and then step back out. So it's kind of sawtooth. And it is a very amusing concept here, and very nuanced for what the 3 laws are. Through action or inaction, you must not allow a human to come to harm. You must obey a human unless it contravenes Rule 1. And you must protect yourself unless it contravenes 1 and 2. But what else is here is this idea that they are in fact potentials. That, well, you're allowed to suffer some damage to follow an order, but there's a limit there. And what that limit is, it's these potentials. And it is interesting because, now true, we have much more knowledge, much more experience with computers today than Asimov would have had back then. But today we do think more so non-potentials, which is more an analog concept, but in digital, where it would just be a binary. Like, nope, conditions are met, stop, and that's it. So yeah, it is an interesting description here, because I could believe that some people today that could be very knowledgeable of modern technology, that if you had them read this story, would be like, that's not how it would work. It's like, well, it's what they thought would work back then, and in a certain degree, it makes more sense here as well, because the positronic brain, right? It is meant to mimic the way a human brain works. So, and we do think more so in terms of potentials, or rather more so in terms of balances. How much danger am I allowing myself to be in for some purpose? That, I myself can make that decision for myself. But robots, because they do have hard programming in them, that's different. So, yeah, it is an interesting concept to explore. And as I already said and want to say again, it gets into the nuance of the technology. Because you could see some being like, with the whole must obey unless it would damage itself, you'd be tempted to make a story simpler based on that, where just a robot will try to obey by another means. I'm just trying to think. Where, let's say not harming, like physical harm, but you use a robot to help you rob somebody, steal somebody, but no physical harm will come to them. So Rule 1 isn't in play. But, or maybe it is mildly. But it's like you order the robot to do something that could cause harm. But so instead, it's like, no, I'm not going to do that. It ends up doing it another way. Or however it would cause harm, maybe it's something that would cause harm to the robot. And it's like, well, okay, but I must do it in a different way. So it may just be adapting your commands to satisfy all the rules, would be how I think some people today would write it. I would probably be more tempted to write it that way than this, where it's a, well, no, it's still going to follow your rules. It's just going to run into a conflict. Okay, and then this is the next highlight I have here is where they're now discussing, okay, what can we do here? And it's like, okay, we understand the problem is the balance between rules 2 and 3. So Donovan suggests, it's a mining station. We got all these chemicals. Why don't we just, mix this stuff up and chuck it out there? Because to increase the carbon monoxide so that now Speedy will be driven back towards us and then we can give him a new command. And holy space, Mike, you're a genius. So admitted Donovan modestly. It's just a case of remembering that oxalic acid on heating decomposes into carbon dioxide water and good old carbon monoxide. College chem, you know. And this is again giving us a sense of their dynamic. In that Powell is the more intelligent of the... Well, he's the smarter of the two. Typically, I try to divide smart and intelligent, where smart involves book learning. Intelligence is the processing of the information. Donovan could be very, very intelligent, but he's not so rigorous in his thinking processes, which is more something you would learn from a book. He might be more based on intuition, right? And Donovan's like, well, I remember that, so we can just do that. And this is part of how they work well together. That while Powell is almost like Sherlock Holmes in that he sees these things and just breaks it down into these constituent components. He sees it that way and he can process it down that way, but bringing in something new. Or just having this idea of, well, yeah, we can just hurl these grenades out there. It's like, Powell isn't necessarily going to think of that. But Donovan will, because it's like, well, why don't we just do this? And sort of why don't we just hit it with a rock? It's like, yeah, why don't we just do that? I mean, sometimes a simple solution works well. But also then we get another sense of them because how they do care about each other. They are definite friends. Because after they try that, it fails. Because while it did drive Speedy back, he then started going forward again. Because, yes, you altered the balance to push him out, but he's still stuck in the balance and has to go back. He didn't get close enough for them to give him a new command, so he's just brought closer, but now going away again. So then it's like, and Powell even says, I thought of this, but dismissed it because it's kind of a bad idea. I'm doing that kind of a bad, but it's like, because it's not a good idea, but it's what we got. Which is one of them should just go out there. Because if they are in such danger, that is going to force Rule 1 to come into play. And Rule 1 is more of a binary toggle. Doesn't matter what the potentials are for Rules 2 and 3, a robot must obey Rule 1. Which is, you cannot through action or inaction allow a human to come to harm. So long as Speedy knows that they are in danger, if they go out into Mercury's environment, because currently they're in the shade, they go out into that, they will die. And so long as the situation is such that Speedy sees that it can save them, it must act to save them, which should pull them away and get the balance between 2 and 3 out of the equation. So Powell has suggested this, and it's like one of us has got to do it. And Donovan responds, hold on, Greg. There are human rules of behavior too. You can't go out there just like that. Figure out a lottery and give me my chance. Alright, first to get the cube of 14 goes, and almost immediately 2744. Because Powell had already figured this out. And this is exactly like him. It's like his plan, he's gonna do what he's willing to sacrifice himself if need be. So is Donovan. They're both willing to sacrifice themselves for the other. But Powell is going to abuse the fact that, well, I already thought of this, so obviously I'm prepared for it. I know something that's going to take you longer than me because I figured it out and just going to go with it. So yeah, it's again, we're seeing this nice dynamic there. And it's also something that between the two of them, yeah, Powell would absolutely be like, let's solve a math problem. Donovan is probably like, I have to flip a coin or something. You know, it's like, do you have a deck of cards? Okay. That's actually it for this. But I can't keep talking. Because there's more to talk about. This does work. It does snap Speedy out of it. And Speedy's actually then concerned with, like, oh no, is Mr. Powell going to be angry with me? Oh no. It's like, no, I mean, it's not your fault. And does tell Speedy that. But it is also because they do still need the selenium. Donovan tells him to go to a different source of selenium and makes it an order such that it doesn't matter what damage comes to you from this, you must do it. And so he does, no problem. But one thought that I did have while reading it is, do you think if we ever were to have robots like this, that they would have order translation systems? And by that I mean, when you give it an order, instead of it just taking whatever it is you've said as that it like translates it into a common command, into a more common command. I do kind of wonder, because it's in some ways not unreasonable, so that way there can be a certain clarity. Where I guess a way to put it would be, you can give an order using any of 50,000 words, any combination of 50,000 words, but there's only 500 that are actually command words. And so it will reconstruct the order from 50,000 words down to be within those 500. And I could see that being something, and that you would describe in science fiction, because then it can be analyzed, whereas like the potential, the level of urgency for each of the 500 words is set. So that then you could reconstruct that command and be like, okay, it's at this level of importance versus this level. Whereas with the 50,000, it could fluctuate some. I could see that being an actual concept. I don't think I've got a science fiction story in mind where that would come up, but I do think that would be a reasonable idea here. Because, I mean, obviously commands are important. It's kind of like one debate with modern AI stuff, which technically isn't AI, but that's a whole different argument. And we don't really have that here per se, because they do at least suggest a level of sentience with the robots. They are inferior to humans consistently, but there is still a level of sentience. Personification with them, they do act like humans. I think I had a point I wanted to finish, and now I've forgotten it because I like going off on that slight tangent. Sorry. But yeah, I do like the story. I like this. There's a reason why I've remembered it all these years, because that nuance in the science fiction there to the rules is very intriguing. And I could believe that maybe that's how he even came up with it. Is the idea that, okay, these are the laws of robotics, and I have the whole solar system I can work in. How can I have something that would produce a conflict within the rules? Not that the rules are faulty, but that they can. But what is a situation where one conflicts with another? That is internal, as opposed to I'm just going to solve it this way, but internal. I could see that actually being how he thought of it. I'm just trying to think if do I have anything quite like that in? Nah, can't really remember if I have anything like that in my Catherine verse yet. Maybe I will in the future. Where it is just a conflict within the rules. Not really. I know I do have some stuff in there where it is a conflict within the technology. It's like something I describe in a letter from Catherine. It'll be fun when getting to that. Is that in the pilot's chair? So, pilot's chair. The restraint system, especially for an emergency, is artificial gravity generators in it that when there's like emergency braking, instead of like a strap that pulls you back and holds you there, it actually just increases the gravity to sort of balance it out, but also pull you back into it. And Roman, who's the main character and the pilot, he's never really experienced this before, and he hates it when it does happen, because it goes through a rapid deceleration and just he hates it. And the way he described it is he is there, and it's like doing things in the chair, but once, and I don't really have room to do it, but once like that's all done, he's answered a call on radio, all that, he just kind of slides out of it like that because he is in such discomfort from that. And I think I end that chapter because I just like ending chapters on some sort of good note. Like it ends on a note. It ends on a beat, but also having be kind of humorous. And for if I remember correctly, the way that chapter ends is him basically thinking, they had something in the past called seatbelts. I should look into those. And it's like, that might be more comfortable, because those at least, it's like there is some motion, and it's not just you suddenly feel like gravity's pulling you back. You suddenly feel like you're on the back, on the ground, instead of being there. It's like, instead of the gravity that way, gravity suddenly goes that way. It's like, yeah, seatbelts so that gravity's still that way. That might be more comfortable. But it's still, it's like getting into the nuance of a technology and seeing it applied in other ways, other places. Anyhow, the next story, I'm pretty sure that's it. Hang on, let me just check what the name of it is. Reason. I think that's it. There's Reason, Catch the Rabbit. I don't remember which one Catch the Rabbit is. Liar, I do remember which one that... No, I don't. I don't remember which one that is. Little Lost Robot, that one I remember. Escape, I'm not sure about. Evidence and the Inevitable Conflict, those I remember. But this one, I'm pretty sure it's on a space station, which it even teases that's, where Powell's like, Donovan, you know where we're going after we finish here, right? Where? A space station. Aw, man. Yeah, that's what old lady Calvin said we'd be doing it when we were done here. But you know what? Being 170, whatever it is, degrees below zero, actually feels kind of nice right now. Like, space stations are worse than being on Mercury, but you know what? After this, I'm good with that. This one is going to be amusing. It's kind of still a nuance to the rules that you'll see, but it's in a different. It has a different flavor to it, a different twist to it. When instead of it being within the rules, it's more the idea that the robot doesn't understand its own origin. And I would not be surprised if they don't necessarily understand the rules. Like, they don't know the rules themselves necessarily, but they must obey them. And it is more amusing because you're basically trying to argue with a zealot. But it's like, wait, how do you have a robot that's a zealot? It's like, well, you'll see. It's fun. It's fun. All right. I've definitely blathered on more than enough. I will just. I like Runaround. I really do. Because it is more technical. Yes, a little verbose at times, but it is you need to make sure you get everything across so that somebody can understand. Because you're getting into nuances, so you do need to explain everything carefully. But, yeah, I think I can just end that. I don't know if as I already said, I don't know if I have a story idea in mind where this kind of thing would come up. I tend not to think about robots. Not that they wouldn't be present in the Catherineverse. They would be, but not in this way. And, well, here, I mean, I actually don't mind mentioning one thing here. Is the notion of AI for me in the Catherineverse is it exists, but it is so common it's just a tool where you wouldn't have robots like this. You wouldn't have more or less artificial life forms, if you will. Because you don't need them. You got people. The AI just assists with tools. It is used as a tool. It exists as that. So also the idea of it being a labor force is incorrect. That no, that tools being used by somebody. They might be autonomous, but it's still tools being used by somebody. So yeah, that's for the Catherineverse. But yeah, okay, definitely blathered more than enough now. See you next time for a reason. I like it. If it's the one I'm remembering, I like it. It's a fun one. See you next time.